On today's show, we'll talk about the Atlanta Hawks picking up another home win. They've been incredible at State Farm Arena in recent days. This one was not always pretty, but they outlasted the Washington Wizards in their home building to improve to 42 wins on the season. That locks in a winning record for the entire campaign. Trae Young was phenomenal. They had great balance in this game. And at the end of the day, they took care of business at home. We'll talk about this game and much more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1212 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And thank you for joining us, as always, on this podcast, Locked On Hawks, and making us your first listen each and every day. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, where you can be watching me live right now if you'd like to do that. Also, I want to encourage you to check out Locked On Sports Atlanta, which, of course, this podcast is a part of, along with Locked On Falcons, Locked On Bulldogs, Locked On Braves, all those podcasts, as well as some newly launched shows on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Check that out today. And we'll dive in now to what became a nice win for the Hawks, a 118-103 victory for Atlanta at home in their final regular season home game of the season. They're now 27-14 in their home building this year, including 19-3 in their last 22 and 11-1 in their last 12 games at State Farm Arena. They've been red hot down the stretch after a weird stretch early in the season when they couldn't win at home. Now they can't lose at home all of a sudden, but it was sort of an up and down game in a lot of ways. The Hawks, of course, won comfortably by the end, but they were losing at times in the middle of this contest. After a 40-point first quarter, they gave a lot of it back. Trae Young had a massive kick at the end of the third quarter, 14 points in less than 3 minutes to break it open, and then honestly never got close again from that point. And the Wizards only had 30 points in the first 20 minutes of the second half. And lots of positives, I won't say lots of, some negatives for sure, but certainly a night that the Hawks took care of business and kept up with the Nets, who won in comeback fashion up in New York. So we'll touch on all of that and what transpired here. But at the end of the day, a nice friendly atmosphere for the fan appreciation night in Atlanta, and lots of positives as the Hawks sort of proceed for their final two games of the season, both of which will be on the road later on this week. As for the game itself, it was back-to-back for the Hawks, also for the Wizards, with travel on both sides. The Hawks, of course, lost in Toronto on Tuesday. If you're listening from that podcast, that's still live and available. My whole breakdown on Tuesday, as well as a podcast that I recorded with Glenn Willis on Sunday. It was actually a fun conversation. So lots of stuff this week already on the feed if you want to catch up on anything that you possibly had missed. But the Wizards, while they have nothing to play for, and that's certainly noteworthy, have been playing pretty well recently. They're 5-2 in the last 7 coming in, even with no incentive to win, really, all in standings. Still, with this win, the Hawks are now 3-1 against the Wizards for the season, so they got the win in the season series. Injury-wise, the Hawks were a little bit healthier in this game, at least for their more prominent players. Bogdanovich and Gallinari were both questionable, ended up playing in this spot, and Gallinari started after having a couple games off the bench recently. In fact, the Hawks only played 8 guys in the rotation. That was a notable change. No TLC in this game, also no Jalen Johnson, no Kevin Knox, etc. Lou Williams was out, though. That was the one notable change to the rotation, was that Lou did not play. He's actually missed 4 of the last 9 for the Hawks as we get closer to the postseason. John Collins, of course, still out doing some light running, according to Nate McMillan, but nothing really progressing there. No setbacks, I guess, which is a positive, but not terribly close. It didn't seem to return to action. And then also a programming note along the way here. Sharif Cooper is back with the Hawks at this point in time. He's been in the G League for quite some time, but now College Park's season actually ended on Tuesday. They actually played great down the stretch, which Sharif is a big part of that, but he's now back with the big league club. No reason for him not to be down the stretch of the season. As for the Wizards, no Bradley Beal or Kyle Kuzma in this one, but they were pretty much healthy otherwise. The Hawks were 10-point favorites, according to our friends at BetOnline, in this game. So they ended up covering, although that was a pretty decent number, I thought. Wizards being competitive-ish down the stretch, but still, when you're favored by 10 at home in a spot where you care and the Wizards do not really have to care, you got to win this game. And the Hawks, of course, took care of business through that lens. We'll dive into the game now, and the Hawks actually went down right away. This one, 14-6 at the outset. Washington scored in 6 of their first 7 possessions. The Hawks did answer from there with 7 straight points, but Gallinari was really aggressive out of the gate. Took 8 shots in the first 7 minutes for the Hawks. The Wizards, though, were really hot. They made 8 of their first 10 shots. They were turning the ball over a lot, which kind of helped the Hawks in the first quarter. But the Hawks actually had a slow start. They were 6-15 from the floor. Hunter had a pretty bad turnover on a fast break in which he threw the ball away. Kind of a weird one there. But then the Hawks got hot a little bit, making 3 threes in 39 seconds to take the lead for the first time in a while. Hunter made the first one, then Bogey made back-to-back ones after a turnover. And the Hawks did close strong in the first quarter, a 17-7 run to go up 40-31 after one. And through 12 minutes, the Hawks had a 154 offensive rating. So they scored more than a point and a half per possession. That is, of course, absolutely ridiculously good. 59% from the floor after a slow start, 6-13 from three, had 12 assists and 2 turnovers in the first quarter, which is elite by any description. Bogey had 9 points on 3 shots in the first 5 minutes that he played. Okongwu made his first 3 shots, so the bench overall was 6 for 6. And the Wizards, this is a crazy stat. The Wizards shot 68% from the floor in the first quarter and lost the quarter by 9 points. That's hard to do, but the Hawks did not have a lot of stops other than turnovers, but the Washington Wizards turned the ball over 8 times in the quarter, which kind of left the door open for the Hawks, and they ran through it on the offensive end of the floor. I mentioned this a minute ago, but the rotation, only 8 guys in this one. Obviously, they ended up playing some garbage time for guys like Knox and Johnson and Gorgui Dieng and Sharif and Skylar Mays, but through the competitive portion of this game, only 8 guys played. And it wasn't the first time all season that's happened for the Hawks, but certainly not the usual. I think if Lou would have been available, he probably would have played because he's been playing in most games. But the one notable change is that TLC went from starting to not playing at all. And that wasn't a huge surprise to me. People were asking about Jalen Johnson. I think the much more surprising development was that TLC did not play in this game. But with Gallo back, they were able to play all 48 minutes with either Hunter or Gallo on the floor. That definitely helps them overall. And then we also have all of your wings available. They played their best 8 guys in this game. Their best available 8 played. And obviously, you could certainly debate on whether they had to treat it this way, but they definitely treated this game like it was like a playoff caliber environment, playing their best 8 in a spot where, yes, it was an easier opponent at home, but they also had to win this game, and they certainly were able to do that. I'll be interested to see once Lou returns if he's playing. I assume he will be, but I'm not 100% sure on that on Friday. And then you throw in the potential of Collins. Maybe you go back to TLC for matchup purposes at some point. But in this game, it was only 8 guys, and that was pretty clear right away because once Hunter came back in for Gallo at the 4, it was like, all right, I think it's going to be 8, and it was 8 throughout this contest. From there was a run by the Wizards, an 8-0 run early in the second quarter. Nate was not very happy about that. Kind of some shades of Tuesday night's loss to Toronto, in which the bench unit was kind of blitzed and the lead evaporated. Porzingis was pretty hot for the Wizards despite having a slow start this season from 3-point range. He was a good jump shooting contest for him. But Hunter got bothered by the officiating at one point. He got a technical foul after he was called for a foul on Hachimura. It seemed to sort of get out of sorts a little bit. He was demonstrative with the officials, which is not usually the DeAndre Hunter attack and the sort of approach there. But he went to the rim a few times after that, did not have any success. He was actually 0-5 from 2 in the first half and 0-7 on his first 7 2-point attempts. That's not great. He was shaky at times in this one. Hawks had a slow stretch overall on offense. The Wizards took the lead late in the half. Capella, though, closed strong with a couple of buckets in the last 2 minutes. There was one where he outran the entire Wizards team down the floor, and Herter threw a beautiful lob pass, sort of a long outlet pass to Capella for a layup. And the Hawks go into halftime up by 2. So after all of that, kind of a roller coaster in some ways. The Hawks were leading at the break despite the shaky defense. 6 guys had 7 points or more in the first half. They had a 131 offensive rating, which is obviously fantastic. We did slow down second quarter, but had 19 assists and 3 turnovers in the first half of this game. A crazy ratio. 15 points each for Gallo and Capella before halftime. The Wizards did shoot it well. In fact, 70% on 2s in the first half, which kind of tells you how bad the defense was at times. But the Hawks did get into the break, despite what I would say they did not play very well in the first half, even though they scored, obviously, sort of at will before halftime, but ended up leading. And from there, kind of never really had a whole lot of trouble. There was at least a little bit of time early in the third quarter where there was some nip and tuck aspect, but for the most part, the Hawks were able to win comfortably from there. Touch on the second half, as we always do on the podcast, as well as some individual breakdowns, look at the standings, look at the last 2 games for the Hawks, etc. But first, before we get to all of that stuff, a word from our sponsors on the podcast today. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that helps you get the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed frames that are durable, and premium high-end finishes on those glasses. On top of that, Shady Rays protection program is something you just can't find anywhere else. They have lost the broken protection on every single pair, and they will send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter how you happen to lose them. Give them a try today. If you don't love Shady Rays, you want to pay anything at all, it's just that simple. Plus 10 meals donated to Fight Hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays. Exclusive for our listeners, you also have a special deal. Head to shadyrays.com, use promo code LOCKEDON, and get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's promo code LOCKEDON for their best deal of the season, which is 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews. Check it all out today at shadyrays.com. One more time, promo code locked on, best deal of the season, 50% off, 2 more pairs at shadyrays.com. All right, we'll dive into the second half now, and neither team scored early on in the third quarter. In fact, no points for like 2 full minutes, which was a sharp departure from the first half and the barrage there. The Wizards, though, as sort of what was going to be a precursor to the rest of the game, actually scored 2 points in the first 4 minutes, four and a half minutes almost of the third quarter. Trae actually had a great defensive possession on Thomas Satoransky, in which he sort of locked him up, really kind of bothered him with his peskiness, really active hands in that possession. It led to a pretty bad breakdown for the Wizards on offense, which was good to see from Trae. The Hawks didn't quite put a lot of daylight between them in that stretch. I thought the Hawks actually missed an opportunity to kind of blow the doors off at that point because Washington could not score, but the Hawks also had a slow start offensively. They led by 8 in the middle of the quarter, but Hunter and Rui Hachimura kind of exchanged possessions and stretches where they were kind of banging their head against the wall on offense. Hunter was some bad 2-point attempts. Hachimura, I think, was 2 of 9 from the floor at that point in time. Hunter did have a sort of break the drought with a 3-point play. That was actually a nice drive and finish from DeAndre, but he had really kind of a weird game on offense. And the lead was kind of in that 4 to 6 point range for most of the third quarter. But then the explosion of the night happened with Trae Young at the end of the third quarter. So doing the math here, Trae scored 14 straight points for the Hawks, which is already impressive on its own. 14 points in 126 seconds. So 2 minutes and 6 seconds, Trae Young scored 14 points. Now, 6 of those were at the free throw line, and there's some help there from the Wizards who were fouling him early in the shot clock, but he was still on fire and cooking them. And really, I don't want to say it was over because it wasn't at that point, but that was the biggest swing toward Atlanta in the entire game, really, was that stretch by Trae at the end of the period to go by 12 at the end of the third. So they won the third quarter by 10 points. Washington finally cooled off. They were 6 of 18 from the floor in the third and 1 of 8 from 3. So that kind of it was kind of both sides doing things. In the fourth, again, it wasn't over, but old friend Jason Walker has been a guest on this podcast from the Peachtree Hoops, etc. Said it for me on Twitter, but DeLon Wright did DeLon Wright stuff early in the fourth quarter with a steal and an assist and some nice digs on defense, etc. Bogeyed a couple threes to go up by 13 points. The Hawks did still lose the non-Trae minutes, and if there was one kind of shaky stretch in the fourth quarter, is that the Hawks, when Trae came back in, they were only up by 8 with 7 minutes to go. Obviously, they never trailed in the fourth, but that's a game. Up 8 with 7 minutes to go, it's definitely a ball game. But immediately from there, Gallo scored the next 5 points. And I thought, I even wrote this in my notes, that was probably the end of the game, to be honest with you, when that happened to go by 13. But then if it wasn't over from there, Trae had his own run out of a timeout with 5 straight points of his own. And the Hawks went up by 18 with 4 minutes left, and it was absolutely over from there. Of note, the Wizards scored 30 points in the first 20 minutes of the second half. And that, just as a reminder of kind of how bad that is, obviously that's 1.5 per minute, which is something like a 80 point pace 72 point pace. I don't know why I can't do math all of a sudden, but yeah, 72 point pace for the game, and they scored 38 points in the second half overall. But the Wizards scored 31 points in the first quarter and 34 points in the second quarter, and then they scored 30 points in the next 20 minutes. So it was a sharp departure. Credit to the Hawks for playing defense. Credit to the Wizards for missing a bunch of shots. And that mixture really went toward the Hawks doing their thing. And then with 2 minutes to go, they went to the bench. It was Knox, it was Johnson, it was Gorgie Jang, Sharif Cooper, and Skylar Mays. And it was all academic from there. But notably, the Hawks were going to close, or at least they did play until the competitive portion was over, with DeLon on the floor and Okongwu on the floor. I think if it got close, they probably would have brought Capella back in. But Okongwu was good in this game. So was Capella, just for the record. But I think I kind of liked it going with DeLon because he was, let's just say, good in this game. And Hunter was not, for instance. But alas, we'll dive in, do the rest of this one. Takeaway-wise, the Hawks offensively kind of pedaled off in the second half in terms of their effectiveness and their efficiency, but it's still more than enough. For the full game, they had a 122 offensive rating. That is very, very solid. Of course, that's above their normal average, and of course, they're a top 2 team in the league on offense, so that says a lot. The one notable flaw on offense in this game was they only shot 51% on twos. There was some finishing issues. I believe, Bogey was 0 of 4 on twos. Trae was 5 of 8, but Hunter was, I believe, 1 of 9 on twos. Gallo was a decent enough 7 of 12, but they had some hiccups on 2-point range in this game. But other than that, they were excellent from 3, 16 of 39, which is a great ratio both in production as far as volume and accuracy. They didn't get to the line a ton, only 19 attempts, but that was actually way more than the Wizards had, and they made 84% of them. That's a good way to sort of capitalize on that. 6 turnovers in the full game, which is, of course, excellent. Only 4 live ball. That's also excellent. 26 assists is just totally solid. And when you combine that with 6 turnovers, it's obviously a great ratio, about 4.5 to 1. And then didn't do a lot on the glass in this game on offense, but certainly didn't really need to do that with the way they were shooting it and doing everything else. And then defensively, it got a lot better after halftime. So I would say the first quarter and a half-ish of this game, the defense was pretty bad, to be honest with you. But the second half, the numbers were pretty stark. In fact, after halftime, Washington shot 38% from the floor and 3 of 16 from 3. Some of that's the Wizards missing shots, but the Hawks were better defensively for sure. Only allowed 38 points after halftime. Washington did shoot the ball pretty well for the full game at 49%, but only 10 of 35 from 3. That was helpful to the Hawks. And the big thing was turnovers. The Hawks created 14 turnovers and we turned the ball over 6 times. That's a huge swing in their favor. It's 8 extra possessions if you're just doing the math on that. That helps your efficiency, helps you win games, basically. And then defensively on the glass, it wasn't pretty in the first half, but it was much better in the second half. And that led to a pretty good overall performance on the glass. And of course, that's been a problem, at least for a while, with Capella off the floor. And that really was not the case in this game. So as far as overall stuff from this one, before we move on to the player evaluations, the Hawks were the better team. The Hawks were the more urgent team. They were playing at home. Good setup for them. Washington at the end of a road trip, etc. And certainly they had more legs than the Wizards did in this game, but they still played fairly well after halftime, I think, overall. And then offensively, it was pretty good for most of the way. So lots of positives as you hear the thunder clapping in the background as I'm recording this podcast. My apologies for that if it's on the audio. But alas, here we are, and the Hawks escape, hold serve. How do you want to put that? They get a nice solid win. If you didn't watch this game and you saw the final score, you might probably thought it was a little bit breezier than it actually was, but it was still a comfortable win by the end. And that is all that matters on this night. Before we get into the second half, in terms of the podcast and the player evaluation portion of this show, as well as some standings looks and a look ahead at the last 2 games on the schedule for the Hawks, and word from our sponsors on the podcast. I'm really trying to eat right this year. I'm having a lot of success with that. And honestly, the biggest thing is Built Bar. In some ways, it's actually a lot easier for me to eat right because I actually enjoy eating Built Bars, from the protein-infused puff bars. They're fantastic. All the fan favorites from Built Bar. Each and every bar has 100% real chocolate. Makes a huge difference in taste and texture and all of that fun stuff. And it tastes fantastic every single time. On top of the taste, Built Bar is low calorie and high protein. You can easily replace your candy bars with Built Bars, both in taste and to improve your overall nutrition. Built.com has everything that you possibly need to learn about Built Bar. And also the nutrition page is honestly something that's going to blow you away. With most bars only having 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein with a low calorie count, they are very, very healthy. And Built Bar has long-time flavors like coconut almond and new flavors coming all the time. Plus, each and every flavor is delicious. Check it out, all the stuff at Built Bar at Built.com, and use the promo code LOCKED15 when you get there. If you do that, 15% off on your order with Built Bar. That's promo code LOCKED15, 15% off at Built Bar. Check it all out at Built.com. All right, we'll dive back in now to the player evaluations, and lots of good, some shaky, but certainly more positive than anything else. Start with the bench first. A short bench again, an 8-man rotation in this game, and all 3 guys at the bench played well in this one. It was a sharp swing from Tuesday, which the bench got killed. It was not the case in this one. In fact, all 3 guys were plus 15 or better in this game. DeLon Wright, I say this a lot, but it was really kind of a DeLon Wright game in a lot of ways. He did not make a field goal. He was 0 of 2, but he had 2 points, 4 steals, 3 assists, 4 rebounds. Good defense, DeLon Wright. Made a lot of winning plays and was out there in crunch time, and that was probably the right thing to do, playing alongside Trae Young. Bogey made 6 threes, actually 0 of 4 on 2s, but 6 of 9 from 3-point range. That was his big contribution. He was very aggressive hunting his shot in the second half in particular. 18 points, 4 assists, no turnovers. A good night at the office for Bogey. Okongwu was much better. I thought he struggled pretty badly on Tuesday, but this is more like it for Okongwu. 8 points in 21 minutes, 4 or 5 from the floor, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal for Okongwu. And 3 fouls is not terrible in that stretch, plus 15. I thought he played quite well, and it was not bothering me at all. He was out there in the fourth quarter. The 2 guys who didn't really have it in terms of shooting were Huerter and Hunter. I thought Huerter played fine, had 5 points, only 2 of 9 from the floor and 1 of 5 from 3. They have 3 assists, three rebounds, and no turnovers. I thought he played decent defense in this one, but just didn't have the same kind of juice that he's had recently. He's had a lot of good shooting nights recently, just didn't have it in this game. Hunter, I thought, was the guy who struggled the most for the Hawks on the floor in this one all the way around. Did have 10 points and a steal and a block, but 4 rebounds and assist, was 1 of 9 on 2s. And some of that's noise, but some pretty bad finishing moments, a couple bad passes, bad decisions, a couple of settles for pull-ups. Did make 2 of 4 from 3, but his step inside the arc was kind of maddening. I don't think he was like absolutely terrible, just did not play very well. And then the 3 guys who stood out in the starters were Gallo, Capella, and Trae Young. Capella, I thought, was excellent. 19 points on 11 shots. Great stuff there. Efficiency-wise, 9 of 11. 7 rebounds, 4 steals for Clint. No blocks, kind of a weird ratio there for Clint, but I thought he played really well. Defensively was his usual self, and he's been playing so well for like 2-3 months now, standing out night by night by night. Gallinari was extremely aggressive and played extremely well. 26 points to lead, not to lead all scores, but certainly has many points as anyone on the Wizards did, and was very efficient. Had 10 rebounds as well. That was a huge boost to the Hawks. 7 of 12 on twos, 4 of 7 on threes. And usually when Gallo has big games, he's either just bombing away from three or he's getting on the line a lot. And this game wasn't really either one of those. He had 4 threes. That's obviously a lot, but he got wherever he wanted to. Played 39 minutes. That's a crazy high number for Gallo, but he was fresh after not playing on Tuesday. That probably helped a little bit as well. And I thought just having him back was huge. Opens up a lot of stuff for the Hawks. Defensively, the Hawks just missed John Collins pretty desperately, but offensively, obviously they missed him on that end of the floor too. But with Gallo able to play starters minutes, the absence of Collins is felt more on defense than offense because Gallo is a good offensive player. Obviously, he's a very bad defensive player. But it'd be nice to have John Collins back. But when Gallo is playing and playing well, there's not as much of a drop-off as there is when there's without Gallo and Collins, as there have had happen, let's say, a handful of times in the last couple of weeks. And then Trae Young, his usual brilliance here, 30 points, 11 assists, plus 28 for Trae in his 37 minutes. So if you're doing the math on this one, the Hawks were minus 13 in his minutes off the floor. Obviously, some of that was garbage time, but they were minus 9 in the competitive portion with Trae off the floor. So kind of scary stuff there. But he was 5 of 8 on twos, 3 of 9 from 3, 11 12 free throw line, 11 assists. Just playing extremely well. All NBA stuff. I've been saying it for a while now. Did a whole podcast about all NBA stuff with Robbie Calland last week. I talked about it on my own a lot, but if you're a new listener or watch this for the first time or just ramping up at the end of the season, I firmly believe Trae Young's an all-NBA guy this year. I think, honestly, he'd have a real case for me for first-team All-NBA. I don't think he has any chance of actually making first-team All-NBA, but at minimum for me, he'd be second-team All-NBA this year. I don't know if he's going to make it, but he absolutely should. He's playing extremely well and has been all season long. So there you go on that for my soliloquy on Trae Young at the end of the podcast. As for the standings, the Nets teased the Hawks a little bit in this one. Obviously, the Hawks were playing, so they didn't really know this. But Brooklyn was down 21 at MSG to the Knicks tonight, and they came back and won. Now, the Knicks did Knicks stuff. The Knicks are bad. But, sort of tease there. Charlotte and Cleveland both did not play on Wednesday, so no changes there. So with all that said, the projected expected result tonight was the Hawks win and the Nets win. That's what ended up happening on both fronts. And with the win, the Hawks are now only a game back of Cleveland, but they're still tied with the Nets. They're a game and a half ahead of Charlotte, with 2 games to play for Cleveland, Brooklyn, and Atlanta. 3 to play for Charlotte. As a reminder, the tiebreaker aspect is interesting. The Hawks do have the 2-team tiebreaker against Cleveland, but they lose it to Brooklyn if it's 2 teams. If it's 3 teams, if it ends up Cleveland, Atlanta, Brooklyn, as it very much could at the end of this, that would go to Brooklyn as the 7 seed, Hawks is the 8 seed, and Cavs is the 9 seed if that were to happen. Charlotte's not dead yet either. If they were to win out, they could certainly be getting the mix here. Of course, it's worth noting the Nets are going to be favored in both games down the stretch. The Hawks are going to be favored certainly on Sunday. I would guess, unless Miami pulls the plug on Friday, as they certainly could with where they are on the standings, the Hawks will be underdogs on the road in Miami on Friday. But the Nets, by the way, have Cleveland at home on Friday and Indiana, the zombie Pacers, at home on Sunday. So you cannot expect the Nets to lose. They certainly could. Wouldn't stun me if they lost, but you can't expect it. Miami has a 2-game lead on the field in terms of the number 1 seed, but they probably need one more win. Their next game is on Friday against the Hawks. So I think Miami's going to try in that game, and obviously the Hawks can beat them. No question about that, but the Hawks probably will be betting underdogs in that game. So long story short, I think the Hawks are in a great spot to at least not be the 10 seed. The question is, can they win out? Number 1. Can they get some help from Brooklyn? Number 2. And honestly, Cleveland might lose both games. Cleveland has to play Brooklyn, of course, and then also Milwaukee. If the Hawks were to win out and Cleveland lose out, which is probably what we'll see on Cleveland's front, then they'd be in the 7-8 games against the Nets, full stop. Now, if the Cavs lose out and the Hawks split, then they'd be tied with the Cavs, and we'll see what happens with the Nets. So, and again, as a reminder, the 2-team tiebreaker for the Hawks and Cavs goes to the Hawks. So right now, if I had to project the order at the end of the season, I think I'd probably go Nets 7, Hawks 8, Cleveland 9, always somewhere in the 9-10 against Charlotte. And if that happens, obviously the Hawks would have 2 chances to win one game. It's not too bad of a setup, but we'll get into all that as we get through the week. But the next game on the agenda for the Hawks and the Nets is Friday. Hawks in Miami, and then of course the Nets play the Cavs in a game that everyone should be watching out for during the Hawks game on Friday evening. From here, as I mentioned a second ago, the Hawks are now off on Thursday after the back-to-back, and they go to Miami to play on the road. That is certainly the most difficult game they have left on the schedule. And then, of course, they go to Houston for what is a 3:30 afternoon game on Sunday afternoon during Masters Sunday. Let's just say some not great scheduling for Hawks fans that might be Masters people if you're growing up in Georgia, as I did. Alas, lots of stuff going on here. We'll have the scenarios. If you want the up-to-the-minute stuff, I recommend following me on Twitter if you'd like to, at BT Rowland, or following the show on Twitter, at Locked on Hawks. I'll have some live stuff there. TBD on the next show. It might be Thursday, but it might not be until Friday. I have some scheduling stuff going on, but I will be certainly going to be here 100% after the game on Friday. And then we'll cover the game on Sunday and then get into the play-in because at minimum, the Hawks will be playing at least one postseason game. I would guess they're going to be playing at least 2, but we'll see what happens in the next couple of days. I'm done rambling at the end of the podcast as the storm really brews. I hope the power does not go out for me at this point in time. I'm seeing lots of lightning and thunder and all that stuff to take you behind the curtain as I record this podcast. But thank you for listening to the podcast, everybody. I really, really appreciate it. Please, please, please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and Google Podcasts. And also, in addition to, not just on that, and sort of one on one or the other, I would say in addition to help me out on the audio platform of your choice, Spotify, Apple, and also on YouTube would be very, very helpful. So please spread the word about the podcast. We're ramping up here, hopefully, to the playoffs. And then the offseason is where we do not slow down at all on this podcast. We have all kinds of offseason content. I love the draft. I love free agency, roster building, looking back at the team, looking ahead at the team. All that fun stuff is going to be coming up whenever the season ends, whether that be next week or weeks from now. We'll see on all of that. So thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll see you at the very latest after the game on Friday.